Do you have some sort of preliminary layout where the houses are going to be built on the property? And do you have an idea where the sewer collection lines will be relative to the property?
That's an applicant. Can y'all address that?
The site has not been designed.
Please use the microphone. Stand up.
Sorry. The development has not been designed by the development engineers. So at this point, we've only laid out the treatment plant to be able to handle the flow that's coming in. I hope that answers your question.
On the map of the plant site, it indicates a right-of-way that takes that little chunk out of there. So you're telling me no roads have been laid out as far as you know?
Not finally, for sure.
Okay. Are there going to be lift stations or any pressurized mains on the property?
I can't address that. Sorry.
I see that you plan for 3 phases of construction and 3 phases of sewer plants. Can you tell us about that?
That is a guesstimate, and this kind of goes to a permitting process. The state wants to understand how fast they think the infill is going to come. The way they issue the permit is in phases. So you see the first phase, second phase, third phase. They want to understand that we have enough land to actually build out how much service area is going to be there.
How many houses are you talking about?
I think it's 2,900, I believe.
You know the number. Please, let's.
Okay, so
keep
as the
track
sewer
down.
lines come in, however they should be coming in, where will the effluent be collected? Or the raw sewage, I should say. Where will it be collected?
At the plant.
And how will it be collected? Will it go into a pond first? Will it go into the plant itself?
They'll go into the plant.
It'll go into the plant. So the reason you're doing this in 3 phases is you don't really know at this point what's going to be coming down the pipeline, and you need to plan for that, and you're going to do it in
Correct.
3 phases. Okay. Are there going to be any ponds, holding ponds, settling ponds, any ponds of any nature on the plant site or on the property?
Not that we're planning for now. For raw wastewater or,
Anything?
well, so there is an idea to reclaim the water and to put that back out as purple pipe. I think a gentleman addressed using that on golf courses. That is the primary plan, rather than putting it back into the creek. It's an expensive, it's a good resource. We want to reuse that. There are plans to do that. We haven't located any of that anywhere on the site yet because they haven't finished the design of the subdivision itself.
So would that preclude discharge?
Seasonally, absolutely.
Sir, can we allow other people to ask questions too? And then you
When
can-
I'm through.
Are you speaking for the entire crowd?
I'm speaking for the Scenic Loop below the Creek
All
Alliance.
right.
Once the effluent has completed the treatment process, where does it go?
First, it will go into a tank on the site as treated effluent. Then, presumably, while the infill is coming in, it will go to a distribution system for irrigation, whatever permitted uses are allowed.
Okay, but for the purposes of this permit, it shows you pumping it uphill. So under that scenario, what do you do with the effluent?
It goes to the discharge point into the upper reaches below.
And it's held in some kind of a tank until you put it up there?
Correct.
How much is going to go at any one time?
How many houses will be built?
You tell me.
It's gonna
I'm
change
not
it-
building this thing,
it's
you
gonna-
are.
It's gonna change every day.
What endangered species did you identify and where?
Michelle.
An endangered, can you hear? Okay. An endangered species review was part of my, part of the review, and that consists of looking at our database and seeing what aquatic and aquatic dependent species are within. We look at the county and then the water bodies, and while there are endangered species within Bexar County, this is not identified as being a priority watershed of concern.
You do know that there's a cave preserve with endangered karst invertebrates in it along the bank of the creek.
Yes, but this is not identified as being a watershed of priority of concern, but those aquatic species were.
Well, these are not aquatic species.
Could you repeat the?
These are karst invertebrates that live in a cave on the creek.
Those are considered aquatic dependent species. So those are included in the review.
Any other endangered species? Did you walk the creek? Did you?
I did
or
walk
you,
the creek.
You did walk the creek. Where did you walk the creek?
We walked from the outfall, where the outfall was, and we walked probably like 2 miles downstream from that.
2 miles. Did you leave the Quajolote property at any time?
I think so.
You would have been on private property.
Please,
We were in the stream bed.
let's maintain
We
order
were in
in
the
here.
stream
Do
bed.
you remember crossing through a metal water trap at any point in time?
A metal water trap?
Yes, a metal water trap.
I don't recall.
Then you didn't leave the Quajolote property.
Sir, you have a very long line behind you. Could we let some other people speak up?
Yeah, in a
And then
minute.
you can come back.
Now, these plants that you're talking about putting in, do they have a fairly standard output in terms of BOD and TSS and what have you? Is it just a standard process that the plant does, or does the operator determine to what degree the water is cleaned?
The way the permit is written, there are a set of criteria for what can actually be discharged. And operators always meet that, and that, as a matter of fact, they want to be well below that, generally speaking.
Okay. Would you consider those limits safe for the contributing zone and the proximity of this project to the recharge zone?
Personally, yes.
Okay. Are you familiar with the user services agreement between Lennar and Saws?
In passing,
Are you familiar with the fact that they are supposed to use enhanced treatment methods in this plant, according to that agreement?
I can't say that I recall that, no. I'll take it on faith that that's in there.
You may. So has anyone from your team walked anything beyond the boundaries of the Quajolote Ranch?
Other than public right-of-way, looking at dams, et cetera, downstream, nope.
So
Not that
you
I
do know about the dams downstream,
I do,
but they weren't included in the permit.
correct.
Okay. Was there a reason for that?
It's not a regulatory criteria under the program.
And yet the Highland Lakes are precluded from discharge because they're reservoirs. Can you explain that?
That's probably better directed to the regulatory body.
Heather, do you know the answer to that?
What is the
The
question?
question is, we have 6 dams on the Helotes Creek below the Quajolote Tract. They're used primarily for swimming, but one is a fishing and boating lake. In the Highland Lakes, the TCEQ has a rule that prevents discharge to lakes and reservoirs because of increased sedimentation and nutrient densification. How would that rule apply to these dams?
Good evening, my name is Brittany Lee, and I'm one of the senior staff reviewers at the TCEQ for the Water Quality Standards Implementation Team. The Highland Lakes are a different breed, essentially. In Helotes Creek, those rules wouldn't apply here. That's only for the Highland Lakes. So if your question is, how would we apply that watershed rule to this watershed, we would
Now,
not.
I'm not asking you to apply that rule. I'm asking you to apply the underlying understanding of why that rule exists to these dams.
So in this particular review, based on our implementation procedures, we're required to review up to 2 miles downstream for a 1 million gallon per day plant, such as this one in their final phase.
What about a 1 to 4?
For a 1 to 4, it's 2.7 miles. Or for a 1 to 2, it's 2.7 miles. For a 2 to 3.5, it's 2.9 miles. For 3.5 to 5 miles, it's 3.2.
Is this not a 1 to 4 permit?
So this is a 1 MGD permit. We've only evaluated up to 1 million gallons per day. So what was considered is one of those ponds was considered in this particular review. The other 4.
One of which ponds?
One of the ponds that you're speaking of, I'm assuming, but the dam ponds are not a part of this review, or the pond, or whatever portion of the creek that you're speaking of, it wasn't a part of this review. It's too far downstream.
If it's within 2.7 miles, it's not.
If it's within 2 miles, so
2.7. The permit says 1 to 4 million with a 1 million average.
right. So again, we are required to review, and I can show you right here, sir. we're required to review based on the permitted flow per day. There's a chart in our implementation procedures. If you guys want to look it up on page 17, you're welcome to. And on this chart, for a 1 to 2, it's 2.7. However, this one is up to 1 MGD in their final phase, their average. So we reviewed in practice. In practice, we go 3 miles. However, we're required to evaluate 2 miles. And in those first 2 to 3 miles that were evaluated in this review, there was 1 pond that was noted and accounted for. We've also walked that pond, we've seen that pond, we know the characteristics of that pond.
Is that the pond on the Quajolote Ranch?
Yes, sir, I believe it is.
Okay.
1.1.
Who owns the water that will be coming from the individual homes to your plant?
I don't think I'm qualified to answer that. That's a water rights question.
Anybody here know that answer?
The state does.
It goes to the state.
If the water is within the bed and banks, it belongs to the state.
Now, I'm talking about in the sewer line, when I flush my toilet in the house that I buy in the Lennar development, and it's traveling downstream to the sewer plant, who owns that water?
That's a different department than what we work in, sir.
Okay, so you don't know the answer. When you discharge it from your plant to the discharge point on the Quajolote, who owns that water?
Again, that's a legal question. I'm just the engineer.
Is there anyone at the
That is
TCEQ
the
that can answer
state.
it?
That's the state. That's Waters of the U.S.
The state owns it from the plant to the discharge point.
Can you stand up, please, so people can see who's talking?
Once it leaves the discharge point and enters the bed and banks, it becomes waters of the state.
Okay. The question was, from the plant to the discharge point, who owns it?
That would be the plant. It's on their property.
The plant owns it.
Yeah.
Okay. Does the plant own it from the homeowner's home to the plant?
So would you like to submit these for the
Yeah,
formal
you should
comment?
I already have.
All right, good.
I already have.
Well, then, you may sit down and let someone else speak.
I want to hear the answers.
For your question on what happens once you flush that water and it goes into the collection system, the permit holder is the responsible party. So I
Okay.
guess you could say they own it. So if something were to happen, such as an unauthorized discharge from the collection system, the permit holder is the responsible party. If an unauthorized discharge comes to the plant from the plant, like out of like partial treatment, but it wasn't fully treated and didn't come out of the actual discharge authorized location, the permittee is responsible. That would be an unauthorized discharge.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
That does.
Thank you.
There is a 50-foot drainage easement identified running from west to east below the plant site to the southeast corner of the property. Can you tell me what that's for?
I honestly cannot. Again, sorry about that. So to be clear, I worked on the treatment plant itself. I have not been involved with the land development of the project and housing, drive, roads, all that stuff. So if we can stick to treatment plant questions, I can probably help you.
Okay. What will the constituency of the effluent be when it leaves the plant? Will it be the permit allowed constituency? Meaning the makeup of the BOD, the TSS, all the...
Again, it'll vary every day, but it will certainly, the permit limits are limits, they're upper bounds, so it will certainly be below that.
So when it leaves the plant, it will be below that limit. When it leaves the discharge point 1 mile upstream, will it be the same roughly?
Yes, sir.
When it reaches the water gate, a little over 1 mile downstream in the Helotes Creek where it passes to the Topperwines property, will it be roughly the same?
Depends what's already in the creek. So you're blending creek water and basically drinking water. So I would assume it's gonna be dirtier leaving there than it comes out of the plant.
2 miles downstream?
Can't address hard to say.
So is it safe to say that the further downstream you get, the safer the water is?
I would probably go the other direction.
So is the stuff that makes it all the way to the recharge zone less safe than the stuff coming out at the discharge point?
Depends how many other contaminants are coming down that creek.
Other contaminants meaning what?
Fertilizers, probably the biggest thing. Other things that are in the street getting washed into the creek.
But I'm just talking about your effluent right now.
Yeah, the waters tend to mix up, they don't stay separated.
Well, not as it is right now, it's a dry creek bed.
I bet today it's not a dry creek bed.
No, but 90% of the time it's a dry creek bed. So
Please continue
given
with
that
the
it's a dry
questions.
creek bed, assuming it's a dry creek bed,
Sure.
could you re-answer that question?
If the only water that ever got into that creek, it would be dirtier at the end of the creek than when we put it in.
I understand that the TCEQ has an 11-point screening process that it puts a body of water through to determine the threat level to the water course. Can you describe that to me?
Can you repeat the question?
I understand that you have an 11-step screening tool that you put a body of water through to determine the threat level to the water course.
Can you stand up?
Are you referring to our total phosphorus screening, or are you referring to our anti-degradation process?
Probably both.
Okay, so the total phosphorus screening is located in our implementation procedures as well. And yes, this was put through a total phosphorus screening and determined that a limit was necessary. For anti-degradation considers all streams within the discharge route that were evaluated for this permit. So in saying that, the things that would have been considered in this particular permit would be the Helotes Creek, upstream the pond and downstream the pond. And then after that, there are no other water bodies that we would have evaluated. So with it being intermittent with pools, we would have done a tier 1 anti-degradation review. And based on that is where you would, I'm assuming is what you're referring to, where you would get your results for this permit.
And that determines the treatment level for the permit?
The total phosphorus would, yes, sir.
Okay, what about the other one you mentioned?
That's just an overall recommendation that we would give. It's not necessarily a determination process.
Okay. Are you familiar with the WASP system?
Vaguely, but that's not in our area.
Why doesn't TCEQ use the WASP system that's used by EPA to evaluate streams?
So the WASP system modeling is actually a little more accurate and applicable to larger water bodies like lakes, estuaries, maybe large tidal streams. This is a very small intermittent pools creek setting. So we actually use Qualtex, which is the other sort of rivers and streams main EPA modeling program.
Are you familiar with the Southwest Research Institute study conducted in 2019 and 2020 that did a complete computer modeling of the Helotes Creek watershed?
Yes, thanks to several comments, I'm aware of it, and I looked it up, and I believe they have a final report coming out this year at some point.
The final report came out in October of 2020.
Oh, but online it said final report coming to.
I think you're
Antonio
referring to the San Antonio report.
Oh, okay.
The outcome of that report, which was done by a group of scientists at Southwest Research, determined that any type of wastewater added to the Helotes Creek would degrade the water, recharging the aquifer. Why do you think your assessment varies so dramatically with Southwest Research?
So again, I haven't had a chance to fully consume this report and look at it. That is something that, again, if it's in the comments, we're going to look into and analyze.
So we have to do your work for you.
My modeling work did look at the effluent limits for the surface water, which is what we are charged with making sure it maintains its aquatic life and human health criteria. And for that, yes, I did model it using the Qualtex program and determine the VOD, ammonia, nitrogen, dissolved oxygen, effluent limits.
Talk to me about degradation of water quality. What does that mean to you?
Really?
So we have an anti-degradation review in our implementation procedures, as I referenced earlier. Degradation of water quality would be anything that lowers the quality of the water body, essentially. So our charge is to basically protect and maintain the aquatic life uses and the recreational uses of that stream at the current moment.
So your recommended limits, which evidently do not take into account the SAW's user agreement's enhanced treatment requirement, meet recreational use?
Yes, sir. So our recreational uses are determined using bacteria criteria, and that's determined using our segment criteria. These are numbers that were developed all over the state of Texas for different segments, using stream data gauges, using SWCM numbers or surface water quality monitoring, using those numbers. So several samples have been taken over several years, and criteria has been developed over those years for ambient criteria, which would be like if I went out and stuck a cup in there and measured it, right? And then over time, what that number looks like.
So you're confident that that comports with what's actually going on in the swimming pools in Gray Forest?
I'm not sure about the swimming pools in Gray Forest, and I can't speak to that. I can only speak to what was reviewed for this particular permit.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.